I know you've heard it before. Just be more disciplined. Wake up at 5 a.m., take cold showers, grind harder, and every single time you tried, for a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks, you felt it. That electric feeling of momentum. You thought, this time is different. Then it collapsed. Not because you're weak. Not because you lack character. Not because success isn't meant for you. Because nobody ever told you the truth. Discipline has nothing to do with willpower. In the next few hours, you're going to discover something that the top 1% of performers, Olympic athletes, Silicon Valley founders, Navy SEALs, best-selling authors, already know. Something neuroscience has been proving for decades that the self-help industry keeps ignoring because it's too simple to sell. Your brain isn't broken. Your approach is. By the time this audiobook ends, you won't just understand discipline differently. You will be different. Every chapter in this book is built on applied neuroscience and behavioral psychology. These aren't feel-good theories. These are battle-tested, lab-proven systems that physically rewire how your brain operates. This isn't motivation. Motivation is a spark, beautiful, unreliable, and gone by Tuesday. This is architecture. This is engineering. This is building a version of yourself that shows up whether you feel like it or not, and especially when you don't. There will be no fluff here. No empty affirmations, no vague inspiration. What you're about to receive is a complete operating system for consistent human performance. If you're ready to stop starting over, let's build. The discipline myth that's been wrecking your life. Here's the lie you've been living. You've been told by coaches, parents, Instagram quotes, and every motivational video that's ever autoplayed on your phone. That discipline is about mental toughness, that it's about gritting your jaw, locking in, and overpowering your weaker instincts through sheer force of will. That's not discipline. That's suffering with better branding. And it's exactly why you've failed every time you've tried to build consistent habits. Not because you lack grit, but because you've been using the wrong tool. Think about this for a second. The most consistently successful people you've ever admired. The pro athlete who trains through a blizzard. The entrepreneur who builds before the rest of the city wakes up. The artist who creates when the whole world tells them to play it safe. Do you honestly believe they run on pure willpower? That every morning is a heroic battle against laziness that they somehow always win? Of course not. They're human. They get tired. They get frustrated. They have bad days, bad weeks, bad months. The difference isn't that they feel more motivated than you. The difference is that their behavior doesn't depend on how they feel. They've built what I call the discipline architecture, a carefully engineered set of systems, environments, and neural patterns that make the right actions nearly automatic. By the time willpower would even become relevant, the decision is already made. Here's the neuroscience that explains why this matters so profoundly. Your brain runs two parallel operating systems. The first is the prefrontal cortex, your rational, analytical, decision-making brain. This is where logic lives, where goals get formed, where you weigh consequences and consider your future self. It's powerful, sophisticated, and extraordinarily limited because the prefrontal cortex runs on a depletable resource. Every decision you make, every impulse you resist, every temptation you weigh, all of it chips away at what researchers call cognitive bandwidth. And once it's gone for the day, it's gone. Decision fatigue is real, measurable, and responsible for more broken habits than any character flaw ever invented. The second operating system is the basal ganglia, your habit brain, ancient, fast and tireless. It doesn't analyze or deliberate. It simply executes whatever patterns have been burned into it through repetition. It doesn't care whether those patterns are helping you or hurting you. It just fires. Most people try to build discipline entirely through the prefrontal cortex. They rely on daily decisions. Should I work out today? Should I skip this meal? Should I get off my phone? And they wonder why they run out of resolve by 3 p.m. Disciplined people do something fundamentally different. They use their prefrontal cortex once to design a system. Then they hand the execution over to the basal ganglia, which operates automatically, without debate, without fatigue. They don't decide whether to exercise. The decision was made once, and now it just happens. They don't agonize over what to eat. The plan was created on Sunday, and now it just unfolds. They don't wonder whether to do deep work. Their environment and routine trigger it automatically. This is the architecture of real discipline. And it has nothing to do with how tough you are. Here's the critical insight most people miss. The discomfort of building this architecture is temporary. The benefit is permanent. You struggle once. Then it becomes automatic. Then it becomes identity. And this is where it gets extraordinary, it becomes effortless. Undisciplined people are actually choosing the harder path. Every morning is a fresh negotiation with themselves. Every week is another cycle of commitment and collapse. Every month is another painful gap between who they are and who they keep promising to become. Disciplined people pay once, up front in temporary discomfort, and receive compound interest on that investment for the rest of their lives. Stop fighting yourself. Start designing yourself. Your brain on change, the neuroscience that changes everything. Your brain was not designed for discipline. Let's be brutally honest about that. It was designed for survival, for avoiding predators in the Serengeti, for conserving energy whenever possible, seeking immediate pleasure, and staying close to whatever felt safe and familiar. In a world where lions might eat you, those instincts were extraordinary. In a world where your biggest threats are infinite scroll and DoorDash notifications, those same instincts are actively working against every goal you've ever set. Understanding this isn't defeatist. It's liberating. Because once you stop blaming yourself for having a human brain, you can start working with your biology instead of against it. Here's what's actually happening when you try to build discipline and fail. Deep inside your brain sits the limbic system, your emotional command center. It's ancient, fast, and extraordinarily powerful. Its entire job is to scan your environment for danger and opportunity, and then push you toward pleasure and away from pain. It operates below conscious awareness, which means by the time you notice a craving or an impulse, your limbic system has already started moving your body toward it. Your rational prefrontal cortex can intercept these signals, but every interception costs something. Researchers call this ego depletion, and the evidence for it is overwhelming. Willpower isn't unlimited. It isn't even close to unlimited. It's more like a phone battery that drains throughout the day and desperately needs overnight recovery. This is why brilliant, determined, genuinely motivated people fail at simple habits. It's not a character problem. It's a resource management problem. But here's where the science gets extraordinary. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to physically rewire itself based on experience, means that this situation is not permanent. Every pattern that exists in your brain today was learned. And anything that was learned can be unlearned, replaced, or overwritten. Every time you repeat a behavior, the neural pathway associated with it gets stronger. Myelin, the insulating sheath that makes neural signals faster and more efficient, wraps itself around frequently used circuits. Behaviors that once required conscious effort start requiring less and less until they require essentially none. This is why habits feel hard at the beginning and effortless after months of repetition. Your brain is literally being reconstructed at the microscopic level. The question isn't whether your brain will change. It changes every single day, whether you intend it to or not. The question is what you're programming it to become. Now, here's the system that accelerates this process. Scientists call it the habit loop, and it has three components that work together like a lock and key. The cue is a trigger, a specific signal that tells your brain it's time to execute a particular pattern. The routine is the behavior itself, the action you want to automate. The reward is the neurochemical payoff, the signal your brain uses to decide whether this pattern is worth strengthening. Most people trying to build habits focus exclusively on the routine. They commit to exercising, writing, meditating, eating better. But they ignore the cue and reward, which are actually more important to whether the habit sticks. An unanchored routine, one with no reliable cue, depends on memory and motivation to activate, both of which are wildly unreliable. A poorly rewarded routine, one that connects to no immediate positive experience, sends your brain weak reinforcement signals and the neural pathway stays thin and fragile. Engineer the cue, optimize the reward. The routine practically takes care of itself. The deepest level of this system is identity-based habit formation, and it changes everything. When most people try to build new habits, they focus on outcomes. I want to lose 30 pounds. I want to publish a book. I want to make $1 million. These goals live in the future, which means every day between now and then feels like a deficit. You're always measuring what you haven't yet achieved. Identity-based habit formation flips this entirely. Instead of, I want to be healthy, you say, I am someone who prioritizes their health. Instead of, I'm trying to write a book, you say, I am a writer. Instead of, I'm working on being more disciplined, you say, I am a disciplined person. When you anchor behavior to identity, every small action becomes evidence for who you are. Every workout is a vote cast for your identity as an athlete. Every morning routine is a vote cast for your identity as someone who has their life together. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you are not just completing a task, you are proving to yourself, neurologically, that you are the person you claim to be. Your brain will always seek consistency with its self-concept. When your self-concept is disciplined, undisciplined behavior creates cognitive dissonance, an uncomfortable mismatch that your brain wants to resolve. And the easiest resolution is simply to act consistently with who you believe you are. This is not philosophy. This is applied neuroscience. And when you combine identity-based habit formation with proper cue design, reward optimization, and environmental engineering, which we'll cover next, you create something that feels less like discipline and more like inevitability. The environment protocol, engineering your surroundings to do the work. Here's one of the most uncomfortable truths in behavioral science. Your environment is controlling you right now, and you probably have no idea how. This isn't a metaphor. It isn't an exaggeration. Dozens of Nobel-winning studies in cognitive psychology confirm that the physical spaces you inhabit, the objects within your line of sight, and the sensory cues surrounding you are constantly shaping your decisions below the level of conscious awareness. Psychologists call this priming. Your brain sees a stimulus, and before you consciously register it, behavioral associations activate. You see your phone, and a micro-impulse to check it fires. You see chips on the counter, and cravings begin. You see your running shoes by the door, and a faint urge to move stirs. None of this is conscious. All of it is happening regardless. The disciplined person isn't someone who overpowers these environmental triggers through sheer mental strength. The disciplined person is someone who designs their environment so that these triggers point in the right direction. I call this the environment protocol, and it operates on 3 precise levels. Level 1. Elimination. Remove every environmental trigger for the behaviors you want to stop. Not hide. Not reorganize. Remove. If you're trying to stop eating junk food, don't put it behind a cabinet door and rely on willpower. Take it out of your house entirely. The research on this is unambiguous. When a behavior requires you to resist a physically present temptation, your failure rate is exponentially higher than when the temptation simply doesn't exist in your environment. Think of it this way. A recovering alcoholic isn't considered weak for not keeping a liquor cabinet at home. That's considered smart, because it's working with human psychology instead of pretending human psychology doesn't exist. The same logic applies to your phone if you're trying to do deep work, to the Netflix app if you're trying to sleep earlier, to the cigarettes in your car if you're trying to quit. The most powerful act of self-discipline is often a single environmental decision that removes the need for future self-discipline entirely. People resist elimination because it feels extreme. I should be able to resist, they say. That statement assumes willpower is infinite and free. It isn't. Every act of resistance depletes resources you need for everything else. The smarter move is to never put yourself in a situation that requires resistance in the first place. Level 2. Optimization. Once you've eliminated the bad, you engineer the good. Optimization means strategically placing environmental cues that make desired behaviors the path of least resistance. If you want to read 30 minutes every morning, put the book on your pillow the night before. You have to physically move it before you can go to sleep. And it's the first thing you see when you wake up. If you want to eat healthier, prep meals every Sunday and place them at eye level in your refrigerator. Put the produce in front. Put the Greek yogurt where the leftover pizza used to be. What's easiest to reach is what you'll eat. If you want to exercise consistently, lay your workout clothes out the night before. Put your gym bag by the front door. The friction of not working out should be higher than the friction of working out. Every additional step between you and a desired behavior reduces your probability of doing it. Every step you remove increases your probability dramatically. This is basic behavioral economics, and when you apply it ruthlessly to your own life, the results are staggering. Level 3. Installation. The third level of environment design is creating a space that constantly reflects and reinforces who you're becoming. This goes beyond removing bad and adding good. It's about immersion. Your workspace should feel like the workspace of the person you're becoming. Your home should reflect your values. The screensaver on your phone, the books on your shelf, the quotes visible from your desk. All of it sends continuous low-level signals to your brain about what's normal, expected, and part of your identity. Elite performers do this deliberately. Michael Phelps listened to the same playlist before every race, training his nervous system to associate those songs with peak performance. Your favorite CEOs don't leave their physical environments to chance. Special operations teams design their operating environments to reduce cognitive load and maximize execution speed. But here's what most people miss when they talk about environmental design. They forget their digital environment. In 2024 America, your digital environment might be more influential than your physical one. You carry a supercomputer in your pocket that is engineered by some of the smartest behavioral psychologists on the planet, specifically designed to capture and hold your attention. The apps you have installed, the notifications you allow, the accounts you follow, the content that fills your feed, All of it is programming your brain for specific patterns of thought and behavior. Audit your phone with the same intensity you'd audit your kitchen if you were training for a marathon. Delete the apps that trigger unconscious scrolling. Disable notifications that interrupt deep work. Follow accounts that raise your standards instead of lowering your mood. Your social environment is the third dimension, and arguably the most powerful. The people you spend the most time with set your ambient standard for what's normal. If your closest friends treat discipline as optional, treat achievement as luck, and normalize excuses, your brain will quietly recalibrate to that standard, not because you're weak, because you're human. We are tribal creatures, and conforming to our tribe's norms is one of our deepest biological drives. The corollary is equally true. Spend consistent time with people who execute relentlessly, who hold themselves to high standards, who see challenges as interesting rather than threatening, and your brain will recalibrate upward. You don't have to abandon anyone, but you do need to be intentional. Your social environment is either your greatest acceleration system or your greatest anchor. There is no neutral. The identity shift, how to become the person who never breaks. Most habit change fails at the deepest possible level, and it fails for a reason almost nobody talks about. The behavior conflicts with the identity. You can have the perfect routine, the perfect schedule, the perfect environment. But if at the core of your self-concept, you still believe you are fundamentally an undisciplined person, trying to be disciplined, that identity will sabotage you at every turn. Your brain is a consistency machine. It is neurologically driven to act in ways that confirm your existing beliefs about yourself. When your actions drift away from your identity, your brain experiences discomfort, and it resolves that discomfort by pulling your behavior back toward what's true about you. This is why so many high achievers can transform their professional habits while their personal health remains a wreck, or why someone can be ruthlessly organized at work but chaotic at home. The identity in that domain hasn't shifted. The behavior has nowhere stable to land. Real, lasting discipline doesn't begin with behavior. It begins with the declaration and construction of a new identity. This isn't positive thinking. It isn't fake confidence. It's understanding that identity is not something you discover. It's something you build through accumulated evidence. Here's the process. Step 1. Decide who you are becoming, not who you want to be someday. Who you are becoming right now in this moment. I am someone who shows up consistently. I am an athlete. I am a creator. I am someone who finishes what they start. Step 2. Gather evidence. This is critical. You can't just declare a new identity and expect it to hold. The brain requires proof. You must take small, consistent actions that demonstrate to yourself that the new identity is real. The actions can be tiny, laughably tiny. That's the point. A person working toward the identity of someone who exercises doesn't need to run a half marathon. They need to put on running shoes and walk to the mailbox. Because that small action is a vote. It's evidence. And evidence compounds. Every morning workout is a vote. Every nutritious meal is a vote. Every time you sit down to write when you don't feel like it. Every time you choose the difficult conversation over the comfortable silence. Every time you do what you said you'd do. That's a vote for your new identity. Cast enough votes and the election is decided. Step 3. Audit your internal story. Most people are running on an identity narrative written in middle school. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad at sticking to things. I've never been athletic. I'm not the kind of person who... These stories feel like facts. They are not. They are interpretations of past experiences that you've repeated so many times they've calcified into beliefs, and beliefs drive behavior. You can choose a different story. Not a delusional story. Not, I am already a world-class athlete when you haven't exercised in 2 years. But a growth-oriented story. I'm someone who is developing extraordinary consistency. I'm learning to finish what I start. I'm building the kind of discipline that most people only talk about. This language does something powerful. It separates you from your past failures without denying them. You're not pretending the struggles didn't happen. You're choosing not to let them define your ceiling. The most overlooked dimension of identity shift is social identity. What the people around you believe about you and expect from you. Social expectations create powerful behavioral guardrails. If your family expects you to sleep in, you'll sleep in. If your colleagues expect you to complain, you'll complain. If your friends expect you to quit, a part of you will quit to stay consistent with their expectations. Conversely, if the people in your life see you as someone who executes, as someone who follows through, as someone who makes things happen, you'll feel the pull of those expectations when you're tempted to back down. You'll rise. This is why the most effective identity shifts often begin quietly. You don't announce a dramatic transformation. You simply start behaving differently. And as the people around you update their mental model of who you are, their updated expectations become another layer of accountability, reinforcing your new identity. The goal is this: discipline stops feeling like something you do and starts feeling like something you express. Not effort, expression. That's the turning point. That's when everything accelerates. Eliminating resistance. Why discipline feels hard, and how to make it feel easy. Resistance is not a personality flaw. Resistance is a design problem. This distinction is one of the most liberating ideas you'll encounter in this entire book, because it shifts the question from what is wrong with me to what is wrong with my system. And systems can be fixed. Every time you experience resistance, that familiar friction between what you intended to do and what you're actually doing, your brain is communicating something specific. It's flagging one of 5 precise problems that make the behavior feel more costly than it's worth. Identify the problem, solve the problem. The resistance dissolves. Problem 1. Unclear direction. Your brain cannot efficiently execute on vague instructions. Be healthier doesn't give your nervous system anything actionable to work with. Do 30 minutes of Zone 2 cardio on the treadmill at Planet Fitness every weekday at 6:30 a.m. Does. The vaguer your goal, the more work your brain has to do every single time you try to take action. That work shows up as resistance. You stall because your brain is still trying to figure out what exactly you're supposed to do. Beyond the tactical clarity, you need meaning clarity. Your brain is asking at a deep level, why does this matter enough to be uncomfortable for? When you can answer that question, when your daily behaviors are directly connected to a compelling vision for your life, resistance drops dramatically. Connect every discipline practice to something you deeply care about, not an abstract good like health, but something viscerally real. The feeling of being physically capable at 60, being a model for your kids, having the energy to pursue work that actually lights you up. The more specific and personally meaningful the connection, the less your brain will resist the behavior. Problem 2. Overwhelming magnitude. The human brain treats large challenges as threats. When a goal feels too big, too distant, or too far outside your current capability, your threat detection system activates, and resistance is the result. The counterintuitive solution is to make your starting point almost insultingly small. Not because small actions are the goal, but because small actions bypass your brain's threat response, build momentum, and create the neural pathways that make larger actions feel natural later. Want to build a writing habit? Commit to one sentence daily. Not because one sentence will get you anywhere, but because showing up for one sentence every single day constructs the identity and the pattern. The sentence will almost always turn into a paragraph. The paragraph will sometimes turn into a page. But even when it doesn't, the consistency is being preserved. James Clear calls this the 2-minute rule. Start any new habit as a 2-minute version of itself. The purpose isn't the 2 minutes. The purpose is getting through the door. Because once you're in motion, continuing is far easier than starting. Think about your own experience. How many times have you dragged yourself to the gym grudgingly, fully expecting to hate every minute, and then felt glad you went? The barrier isn't the workout, it's the starting. Remove the starting barrier, and the behavior follows. Problem 3. System failure. When your desired behavior requires constant decision-making, improvisation, or problem-solving, your brain experiences that cognitive load as friction. And friction becomes avoidance. You don't just need to decide to work out. You need to decide what workout, what time, what to wear, what equipment to use, what music to play, where to go. By the time you finish negotiating with yourself, you're exhausted, and it's time for bed. The solution is systematization. Remove every decision from the execution of your habits. Plan every detail in advance. When you're calm and clear-headed, lay everything out. Create checklists, templates, and rituals that transform complex behaviors into single, simple triggers. Highly disciplined people don't have more willpower. They have fewer decisions. Problem 4. Value conflict. This one is subtle, and it's responsible for more silent self-sabotage than almost anything else. If at some level you associate discipline with rigidity, joylessness, or the grinding lifestyle of someone you don't want to become, your brain will resist discipline as a form of self-protection. You're not lazy. You're conflicted. You might believe that disciplined people are boring, that structure kills creativity, that successful people sacrifice something essential to get where they are. And you're not willing to make that sacrifice. These beliefs don't usually appear consciously. They operate in the background, quietly breaking your acceleration. The work here is reframing. Show yourself through evidence that discipline creates freedom, not restriction. That structure enables creativity by removing low-level decision noise. That the most interesting, joyful, deeply fulfilled people in history were almost uniformly disciplined people. Discipline isn't the enemy of the life you want. It's the vehicle. Problem 5. Missing reward signal. Your brain makes a simple calculation about every behavior. Is the payoff worth the cost? When the benefits of discipline feel abstract, distant, and uncertain, while the costs feel immediate, concrete, and certain, that calculation consistently comes back negative. Your brain says, not worth it, and resistance wins. You need to engineer immediate rewards for disciplined behavior, not distant outcomes. Immediate experiences that your brain can process right now, today, after this specific action. This might be as simple as a satisfying checkmark in a habit tracker. The dopamine response to visual completion is real and measurable. It might be a specific post-workout ritual you genuinely enjoy, a playlist that only plays during your deep work blocks, a coffee you only drink on mornings when you wake up on schedule. These aren't bribes, they're behavioral engineering. You're teaching your brain to associate the feeling of discipline with pleasure. And over time, that association becomes neurologically embedded. Eventually, the behavior itself becomes the reward. When you address all 5 sources of resistance, clarity, magnitude, systems, values, and reward, discipline doesn't feel hard anymore. Not because you've become superhuman, but because you've removed the obstacles that were making it hard in the first place. The momentum engine, how small wins, compound into unbreakable consistency. Let me tell you something that will reframe the way you think about discipline forever. The most powerful discipline action you will ever take is not the one you do on your best day. It's the one you do on your worst. The morning you show up with a headache, a full inbox, a bad night's sleep, and zero motivation, and you still do your minimum viable action. That moment is worth more than 100 perfect days. Because that moment proves something to your nervous system that no amount of inspiration ever could. It proves you don't need to feel like it. This is the secret behind what I call the momentum engine, and it operates on principles that most people fundamentally misunderstand. Most people think momentum comes from big wins, from the days when everything flows perfectly, when the energy is high, when the work comes easily. They think discipline is about having more of those days, but real momentum, the kind that survives life's inevitable disruptions, is built in the gaps. In the Tuesday when you're traveling and still do 15 minutes of work toward your goals. In the Saturday when family drama derails your entire plan and you still go for a 10-minute walk. In the moment where you could justify stopping and you choose to do the minimum instead. Here's the neuroscience of why this matters so profoundly. Your brain tracks behavioral patterns and uses them to generate predictions. When you maintain a streak of consistent behavior, your brain begins to expect that behavior, and expectation makes execution easier. The behavior becomes part of your predicted normal. When you break the streak, even once, your brain updates its prediction. Discontinuation becomes as expected as continuation was before, and the next restart feels harder, not because the behavior itself has changed, but because your brain's prediction has shifted. This is why the most disciplined performers are almost obsessive about streak maintenance. A 200-day streak of meditation has more psychological power than the sum of its individual sessions. The streak itself has become an identity anchor and a source of momentum. The momentum engine runs on 3 core mechanisms. Mechanism 1, minimum viable consistency, MVC. Your MVC is the smallest action that still counts as showing up. It's the non-negotiable floor, below which you never go, regardless of circumstances. If your goal is to write a book, your MVC might be 1 sentence. If your goal is to build a business, it might be 1 meaningful outreach message. If your goal is fitness, it might be 10 push-ups and a 5-minute walk. These actions seem laughably small. They are supposed to. Their value isn't in the direct progress they generate. Their value is in the unbroken chain they preserve. On excellent days, you'll far exceed your MVC. The 2-minute rule kicks in and momentum carries you to an hour of work. But on the days that try to destroy your streak, the ones where life is genuinely difficult, your MVC is the bridge that keeps the pattern alive. Never negotiate the MVC. It is sacred. Mechanism 2, momentum preservation, protocols, MPP. Life will disrupt your ideal execution. Travel, illness, family emergencies, unexpected demands, they are not exceptions to life. They are features of it. The question is whether you've prepared for them. Momentum. Preservation protocols are predetermined backup plans you've designed in advance for when your normal execution isn't possible. Not emergency responses cobbled together in a moment of chaos. Deliberate, pre-designed systems that you can execute on autopilot when you're already under stress. If you normally strength train at your gym, your MPP might be a bodyweight routine you can do in a hotel room in 15 minutes. If you normally write from 5 to 7 a.m. at your desk, your MPP might be 10 minutes of voice notes on your phone during a commute. The goal isn't to replicate your ideal performance. The goal is to preserve the pattern, because the pattern is the asset. Create your MPP before you need it. Write it down. Know exactly what your fallback looks like for travel, for sickness, for grief, for overload. When those circumstances arrive, and they will, you don't have to think. You just execute the protocol. Mechanism. 3. Strategic momentum. Multiplication. Here's where the real magic happens. Once you've established solid momentum in one discipline domain, once a habit has truly become automatic and identity anchored, you can leverage that psychological confidence to accelerate habit formation in adjacent areas. This works because discipline is partially an identity state. When you consistently follow through in one area, you begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, period. That self-perception carries over. You expect yourself to be consistent, and your behavior rises to meet that expectation. But multiplication must be sequential, not simultaneous. One of the most common and costly mistakes in personal development is trying to change everything at once in a burst of motivation. You overhaul your sleep, diet, exercise, work habits, and social media use in the same week. And the moment one system falters, the whole architecture collapses. Choose one habit. Anchor it completely. Let it become boring in its reliability. Then add the next. The compounding is real, not just in the direct benefits of each habit, but in the growing belief that you are someone who builds things and keeps them built. The final dimension of momentum is social. When the people around you know your commitments, when they've watched your streak grow, when they've come to expect your consistency. Breaking that streak costs more than just your own psychological momentum. It costs a piece of their belief in you. And their belief in you, if you've invested in the right relationships, is something worth protecting. External accountability doesn't replace internal motivation, but it reinforces it at exactly the moments when internal motivation is lowest. Protect your momentum. Build it through minimum viable actions. Preserve it through pre-planned protocols. Multiply it strategically. And never ever underestimate the compounding power of showing up small, consistently over a long time. The recovery blueprint. Failing forward. Faster than anyone else. You are going to fail. Not maybe. Not possibly. Definitely. You will miss a workout. You will eat something you promised yourself you wouldn't. You will procrastinate on the thing that matters most. You will have a week where everything you've built seems to crumble simultaneously. This is not a prediction about your character. This is a mathematical statement about the nature of long-term behavior change. Anyone who tells you that real discipline means never failing has never actually built anything that lasted. The only question that actually matters, is what happens next. Here's the brutal distinction between people whose discipline lasts and people whose discipline doesn't. It's not the failure. It's the recovery. Most people have what researchers call an all-or-nothing relationship with their habits. One missed gym session signals that they're off the wagon. One bad meal means the diet is ruined. One procrastinated work session becomes evidence that they'll never change. And this interpretation turns a single lapse into a full spiral. The psychological mechanism behind this is well documented. It's called the abstinence violation effect, the phenomenon where a single violation of a commitment triggers feelings of failure so intense that they lead to abandoning the commitment entirely, not because the violation was catastrophic, but because the person's interpretation of it was. The disciplined person responds to failure with a completely different protocol, one that was designed in advance when their thinking was clear, before emotions got involved. I call this the recovery blueprint, and it runs on 4 principles. Principle 1, rapid recognition. The longer you stay in a failure state, whether it's a week of skipped workouts, a month of poor nutrition choices, or a spiral of avoidance around important work, the more psychological weight accumulates and the harder the restart becomes. Speed of recognition is an asset. Build systems that alert you quickly when you're slipping. This might be a daily check-in practice, a 2-minute morning self-assessment where you honestly evaluate where you are relative to your commitments. It might be a trusted accountability partner who notices when you've gone quiet. It might be tracking apps that make deviations immediately visible. The goal is to compress the time between failure and awareness, because the moment you recognize a failure clearly, the recovery process can begin. Principle 2, immediate action. Here is one of the most powerful recovery principles in behavioral psychology. Never let 2 mistakes compound into a pattern. 1 missed workout is a lapse. 2 consecutive missed workouts is the beginning of a new pattern. The fastest way to neutralize a lapse is to take immediate, visible action. Not tomorrow, not after you've processed your feelings fully, but right now, in some form. You missed your morning workout. Do 10 push-ups before lunch, not to compensate, but to reestablish the pattern signal in your brain. You ate a meal you regret. Drink a full glass of water and eat something nourishing at the very next meal. You wasted 2 hours on distraction. Close the distracting tabs and write 1 paragraph. The action doesn't have to be big. It has to be immediate. It has to say, this lapse does not define my pattern. The pattern continues. Principle 3, pattern analysis. Disciplined people treat their failures as data, not verdicts. Every time you fail, every time the pattern breaks, there is information in that failure. Specific, actionable information about the conditions under which your discipline is vulnerable, the time of day, your stress level, your sleep quality, the social context, the environmental triggers that were present. Keep a simple failure log, not a shame journal, a tactical intelligence file. What were the circumstances? What do they have in common with other failures? What pattern is emerging? You might discover that your nutrition always degrades when you're traveling without meal prep, that your morning routine collapses whenever you go to bed past midnight, that your deep work sessions disappear whenever a major conflict exists in a key relationship. These patterns are extraordinarily valuable because they allow you to shift from reactive recovery to proactive prevention, which brings us to the most advanced form of this entire framework. Principle 4, system refinement. Every failure is a system problem, not a character problem. When you fail, your job isn't to condemn yourself or commit to trying harder. Your job is to ask, what was wrong with my system and how do I fix it? Maybe you need a more robust meal prep process for high-stress weeks. Maybe you need an earlier cutoff for screens to protect your sleep, which protects your morning routine. Maybe you need a better travel workout system, or a more reliable accountability structure, or a simpler decision template for moments of high temptation. Improving your system based on failure data is how disciplined people actually get better over time. They don't just repeat the same habits indefinitely. They evolve their habits based on what they learn from their failures. The final piece is this: separate your behavior from your identity. 1 bad week does not make you an undisciplined person. A month of struggle does not prove you're incapable of change. An identity is defined by a long-term pattern, not a worst moment. And if your overall consistency rate is 75 or 80%, you are performing in the top percentile of human self-regulation. even if it never feels that way in the moment of failure. Discipline is not the absence of failure. Discipline is the mastery of recovery. Advanced habit architecture, building behaviors that actually last. Let's correct one of the most persistent myths in self-help. Do something for 21 days and it becomes a habit. You've heard this. Maybe you've built your entire discipline strategy around it. It's wrong. The 21-day myth originated from a plastic surgeon in the 1960s who noticed his patients took about 3 weeks to emotionally adjust to their new appearance. Somewhere along the way, this observation became canonized as a universal timeline for habit formation. The actual research tells a very different story. A landmark study from University College London found that habit automaticity develops anywhere from 18 to 254 days, with the average landing around 66 days. And the timeline varies dramatically depending on the complexity of the behavior, the person's existing neural patterns, and, critically, how the habit is architecturally designed. In other words, the how matters as much as the how long. Real habit architecture operates on 5 precise levels. Level 1. Environmental cue design. Time-based cues are weak. I'll work out at 7 a.m. Depends on your memory, your alarm, and your motivation to connect the abstract time to the specific action. All 3 are unreliable. Environmental cues are powerful. A physical object, a sensory trigger, or a situational circumstance that automatically activates the associated behavior. That's reliable because it removes the human error from the activation chain. Instead of relying on a time to trigger your habit, anchor it to something that reliably exists in your environment. After the alarm goes off, feet hit the floor, workout clothes are already visible, equals the workout ritual activates. After the final meeting of the workday, laptop closes, journal opens equals the evening review begins. After the commute ends, bag gets dropped by the door, protein shake gets made equals the recovery ritual starts. The most advanced version of this is the cue chain, where one environmental trigger automatically leads to the next, creating an unbroken behavioral sequence. The trigger initiates a cascade. Getting out of bed triggers putting on workout clothes, which triggers going to the kitchen for water, which triggers walking to the exercise area. You're not making 5 decisions. You're making 1. Level 2. Behavioral chaining. Individual habits are unstable in isolation. Behavioral chains are remarkably robust. Instead of building one habit, build a sequence, where each action in the chain is both the completion of one habit and the cue for the next. The chain itself becomes the habit. The sequence is what you're automating. This is how elite performers run their mornings. They don't have a morning habit. They have a morning sequence where each element flows into the next without gaps, negotiations, or decisions. Alarm off. Feet down, glass of water, deep breathing, movement, shower, nourishing food, priority work. The whole sequence runs like a program that was written once and now just executes. The key to building chains is habit stacking, attaching new behaviors to existing ones. You're not creating new neural space from scratch. You're extending established pathways into new territory. After I brew my morning coffee, I write 3 lines in my journal. After I close my laptop at end of day, I walk outside for 10 minutes. After I finish dinner, I lay out tomorrow's clothes and review my priority list. Each new behavior rides the existing momentum of the behavior it follows. Level 3. Reward optimization. The reward doesn't have to be external. In fact, the most durable rewards aren't. The most powerful habit rewards are neurochemical. They trigger real changes in your brain chemistry that make you want to repeat the behavior. The endorphin response to exercise. the deep satisfaction of completing a creative work session, the calm clarity of a meditation practice, the dopamine hit of checking off a completed task on a visible tracker. But you can engineer these responses before they develop naturally. The trick is to pair your desired habit with a genuinely enjoyable experience, and to make that pairing exclusive. Reserve your favorite playlist exclusively for workouts. Only listen to that podcast you love while meal prepping. Only drink your specialty coffee after your morning deep work session is complete. You're creating associations. You're teaching your brain, this behavior leads to something I want. Over time, the association becomes so strong that the habit itself starts to feel rewarding, and eventually it is. Level 4. Context. Variation. Most habits are context-dependent. They work in the specific environment where they were formed, and nowhere else. This fragility is a design flaw, and it's why so many people's habits collapse when they travel, change jobs, or experience any significant life disruption. The habit was anchored too tightly to a single set of conditions. Anti-fragile habits work across multiple contexts. Build them that way from the beginning. Practice your habits in varying environments. Work out at the gym and at home and outdoors and in hotel fitness rooms. Meditate in your usual spot and on airplanes and during lunch breaks. Read at your desk and in the car and before bed. The more context you've associated the behavior with, the more triggers you've created, and the more resistant the habit becomes to disruption. This doesn't complicate the habit. It just means having a simplified version ready for every context. Your full workout might need equipment. Your travel version needs nothing but floor space and 15 minutes. Level 5. Progressive scaling habits that never evolve eventually become maintenance rather than growth. The goal isn't to build a perfect habit and maintain it indefinitely. The goal is to build a habit that continues to challenge you at the appropriate level as your capacity grows. Like strength training, if the weight never increases, the muscle never grows. Every few months, audit your habits and ask, is this still challenging me? Am I still growing from this? Or has this become so automatic that it's no longer building capacity? Scale in multiple dimensions. Duration, intensity, complexity, sophistication. Move from basic habit tracking to performance analytics, from simple morning movement to structured athletic training, from casual reading to deliberate learning with active recall. The discipline infrastructure should grow with you, always just slightly ahead of your comfort zone, always pulling you toward the next level of your potential. The energy architecture, why everything falls apart. When you ignore this, you could have the most perfectly designed discipline system in history, the ideal environment, the clearest identity, the strongest habits, all of it architected with surgical precision. And if, or say, you're running on empty, none of it will work. Discipline without energy management is like running the most sophisticated software on a dying battery. The program doesn't function at reduced battery capacity. It crashes. This is the dimension of discipline that almost every system overlooks. Not because it's not important. It's arguably the most important operational foundation. But because it isn't sexy. No one wants to talk about bedtime when they could be talking about 5 a.m. routines. Here's the truth. The 5 a.m. routine depends on the 9 p.m. bedtime. Ignore one and you break the other. Your energy operates across 4 interconnected systems, and when any one of them depletes significantly, all the others are compromised. Physical energy is the foundation. Its primary driver isn't your workout, it's your sleep. Research from Matthew Walker and others at UC Berkeley is unambiguous. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired. It impairs decision-making, reduces self-control, disrupts emotional regulation, and measurably undermines the neural plasticity required to build new habits. When you sleep less than your brain requires, you are systematically undermining every discipline system you've constructed. The disciplined person treats sleep as a non-negotiable performance input, not a luxury, not something you catch up on weekends, a biological requirement that enables everything else. This means a consistent sleep schedule, same bedtime, same wake time 7 days a week. An environment optimized for recovery, dark, cool, quiet, free of screens for at least an hour before lights out. An evening routine that deliberately downshifts your nervous system, signaling to your brain that the day is complete and recovery can begin. Beyond sleep, fuel strategically. Your food choices directly affect your cognitive performance, your emotional regulation, and your energy stability throughout the day. Processed foods and refined sugars create energy spikes, followed by crashes, which means your discipline access is high for an hour and then depleted for 3. Protein, fiber, and healthy fats create stable, sustained energy that supports consistent cognitive performance. Eat proactively, not reactively. Plan your nutrition around your performance demands, not around what's convenient or available. Movement is an energy input, not just an output. The right dose of exercise at the right time enhances cognitive function, improves mood regulation, and increases overall energy availability. The research on this is overwhelming. 20 to 30 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise produces cognitive benefits that last for hours, including better focus, improved working memory, and reduced anxiety. Mental energy is your cognitive bandwidth, your capacity for decision-making, creative problem-solving, and focused attention. And it depletes with every decision you make. The solution isn't to make fewer important decisions. It's to eliminate unimportant decisions entirely through automation and pre-commitment. Standardize what you wear. Pre-plan every meal. Create templates for recurring work. Schedule your priorities so your day doesn't require continuous triage. Your cognitive capacity is too precious to spend on things that don't matter. Guard it fiercely. Align your highest stakes mental tasks with your natural cognitive peaks. Most people have a predictable pattern. Typically, their sharpest window is in the morning, several hours after waking. Use that window for your most important work, deep creation, complex problem-solving, critical decisions. Save administrative tasks, email, and routine execution for your natural energy valleys. Working against your cognitive rhythms is like swimming against the current. Working with them feels like flight. Emotional energy is perhaps the most underestimated drain on discipline capacity. Unresolved conflict, chronic anxiety, negative relationships, suppressed frustration. All of it consumes neurological resources that could otherwise be directed toward your goals. Emotional turbulence doesn't stay in its lane. It bleeds into every domain of your performance. This means developing genuine emotional regulation skills, not just willpower to suppress emotional experiences, but real practices that process and resolve emotional stress. Exercise is one of the most effective. Mindfulness creates meta-awareness. Honest conversation resolves conflicts that would otherwise simmer for months. Journaling processes experiences that might otherwise keep you ruminating. It also means being deliberate about your social energy investments. Some people consistently leave you energized and clear. Others consistently leave you depleted and uncertain. This isn't moral judgment, it's energy accounting. You have limited emotional resources, and where you invest them has profound downstream effects on your discipline capacity. Purposeful energy, what some call spiritual energy, is the deepest layer. When your daily disciplines feel disconnected from anything that genuinely matters to you, every action requires willpower to sustain. There's no internal pull, just continuous resistance. When your habits connect to something you deeply care about, your family, your contribution, your growth, your legacy, they carry their own energy. The 5 a.m. alarm doesn't feel like punishment when getting up means moving toward the life you're building. The hard workout doesn't feel like suffering when it's connected to who you're becoming. Purpose doesn't make difficulty disappear. It makes difficulty worth it. The energy architecture isn't optional. It's the operational floor on which everything else stands. Optimize it, and discipline becomes sustainable. Neglect it, and even the most elegantly designed system will eventually collapse. The social leverage system. Using your relationships as a discipline engine, nobody achieves extraordinary consistency alone. This might feel like a contradiction of everything you associate with discipline. The lone wolf grinding while others sleep. The solitary warrior building while others consume. But that image, while appealing, is a myth that keeps ambitious people isolated and ultimately weaker than they need to be. The science is unambiguous. Your social environment shapes your behavior at a neurological level that your individual willpower cannot match. Humans are not primarily rational agents who occasionally get influenced by others. We are fundamentally social creatures who unconsciously calibrate our beliefs, behaviors, and standards based on the people around us. Psychologists call this social conformity pressure, and it operates whether you invite it or not. Your brain is constantly scanning the behavior of the people in your tribe and adjusting your sense of what's normal accordingly. If the people you spend the most time with treat discipline as optional, excuses as justified, and ambitious goals as naive, your brain will quietly recalibrate to that standard, not through any dramatic shift in your values, but through the slow, relentless erosion of what you expect from yourself. The reverse is equally powerful. Surround yourself consistently with people who execute, who hold themselves accountable, who see challenges as normal parts of the growth process, and that becomes your ambient normal. Discipline stops feeling exceptional and starts feeling expected. This is the social leverage system, and it runs on 4 levels. Level 1. The social audit. You need to be honest, ruthlessly, compassionately honest, about the actual impact that each significant relationship in your life has on your discipline and growth trajectory. Not whether these people are good people, not whether you love them, but whether, when you leave their presence, you feel more capable and motivated, or less. Sort your relationships into 3 categories. Amplifiers consistently energize your ambitions, challenge your complacency, and believe in your ability to grow. Diminishers consistently drain your drive, normalize your doubts, and, consciously or not, pull you toward lower standards. Neutrals have minimal net impact in either direction. The goal is not to eliminate everyone from the diminisher category. Many of those people are your family, your longtime friends, your colleagues. The goal is conscious management of exposure, spending more time with amplifiers, being selective about when and how you engage with diminishers, and being honest about the difference. This isn't selfishness. It's stewardship of the mental and emotional resources that everything else depends on. Level 2. Strategic association. Beyond auditing what you have, deliberately build what you need. The most direct way to accelerate discipline in any domain is to regularly spend time in environments where your desired behavior is the norm. Join a gym where serious athletes train. Find a professional community where consistent execution is the expected standard. Attend events, classes, and gatherings where the people around you are already doing what you want to do. You are not there to observe from the outside. You are there to absorb the culture, the language, the expectations, the mindset that these people carry naturally. Proximity to excellence recalibrates your sense of what's possible and what's required. Identify specific individuals who can serve three distinct roles in your social architecture. Mentors are people who have already achieved the results you're working toward. Their value is not just in the tactics they share. It's in the proof they provide that what you want is actually possible. And in the subtle but powerful way, their expectations of you can exceed your own. Accountability partners are peers at a similar level of development who share comparable goals. The mutual investment in each other's consistency creates a form of social contract that activates when individual motivation runs low. Community, a broader group connected by shared values and commitments, provides the ambient normalization effect at scale. When discipline is the cultural default, it stops requiring effort to be disciplined. Level 3. Accountability. Architecture. Accountability is not just telling people your goals. That's one time and easy to forget. Accountability architecture is designing systematic social pressure that makes consistency visible, rewarded, and reinforced over time. This might mean weekly reports to a small group where each person shares their progress toward commitments, an online community with a daily check-in protocol, a coaching relationship where missed sessions have real consequences, a workout partner whose presence at the gym at 6 a.m. depends on yours. The design principle is this: your discipline becomes more visible to others in ways that create ongoing positive pressure, not shame, positive pressure. The kind that makes showing up feel important to more than just you. The most effective accountability structures have a few specific features. Regular frequency, daily or weekly, is optimal. Specific metrics rather than vague check-ins. Genuine social cost to non-compliance, and genuine celebration of progress. When all four elements are present, the system creates behavioral gravity that pulls you toward consistency even when your internal motivation is depleted. Level 4. Influence expansion. Here's the aspect of social discipline most people never consider. As your consistency grows, you become a source of social influence rather than just a recipient of it. The way you show up, your execution, your resilience, your sustained commitment to growth begins to shift the ambient expectations of the people around you. This creates a feedback loop. You raise your standards, which gradually raises the standards of those who observe you, which creates an environment that reinforces your elevated standards in return. You become the environment you once needed to find. This is how culture changes, not through dramatic declarations, but through consistent modeling. And the most powerful form of leadership in any context is the kind that demonstrates rather than prescribes. Your discipline, sustained over time, becomes a gift to everyone who witnesses it. A permission slip, a proof of concept, an answer to the question that most people quietly carry. Is this level of consistency actually possible for someone like me? Your consistency is the answer. The mental mastery framework, owning your mind. When your mind fights back. Your mind is either your most powerful ally or your most consistent adversary. Most people are losing that fight. Not because they're mentally weak, but because they don't understand the game being played inside their own skulls. Your brain generates somewhere around 60,000 thoughts per day. Most of them are recycled, variations of patterns you've been running for years. Many of them are negative, some are catastrophic, and a significant portion are specifically designed by evolutionary programming to keep you safe by keeping you small. The voice that says you're not good enough. The logic that says now is not the right time. The calculation that says the risk isn't worth it. The feeling that says something bad will happen if you push too far. These aren't moral failures. These are ancient survival mechanisms that served our ancestors profoundly and serve many of us poorly. Real mental mastery is not about eliminating these thoughts. It's about developing a different relationship to them, one where you observe without obeying, where you acknowledge without accepting, where you notice without being controlled. The 5 most destructive mental patterns in the discipline space are these. Pattern 1, catastrophic projection. One missed workout becomes, "I'll never be fit." One procrastinated day becomes, "I'm fundamentally lazy." One failed attempt becomes, "This isn't meant for me." Your brain takes a single data point and extrapolates it into an identity verdict. This is called cognitive distortion, and it's one of the most well-documented patterns in clinical psychology. The countermove is evidence audit. When you catch yourself in catastrophic projection, immediately challenge it with a factual inventory of your actual pattern, not your worst moments, your overall pattern. What's your actual consistency rate over the last month? What have you actually built? What specific evidence contradicts the catastrophic narrative? The catastrophic story collapses under the weight of honest data. Pattern 2, perfectionist paralysis. The inability to start anything you can't complete perfectly is the most well-dressed form of avoidance in the human behavioral repertoire. You don't write the paragraph because you can't write the chapter. You don't start the workout because you can't do the full program. You don't begin the project because the conditions aren't ideal. Perfectionist paralysis is not high standards. It is fear of failure wearing the costume of high standards. The countermove is completion bias. Done is infinitely better than perfect and unstarted. Imperfect action generates information, momentum, and progress. Perfect inaction generates nothing except an increasingly heavy backlog of things you were going to do when the time was right. The time is never right. Start anyway. Pattern 3, comparison poisoning. In the age of curated social media highlight reels, comparison poisoning has reached epidemic levels. You see someone's published book, their physique, their business success, their relationship, and your brain uses that information to generate an immediate, unfavorable comparison to your own behind-the-scenes reality. Their polish versus your mess, their achievement versus your attempt, their arrival versus your still in progress. This comparison is not just unfair, it's neurologically toxic. Research consistently shows that upward social comparison, when used as a self-evaluative metric rather than an inspirational signal, correlates strongly with decreased motivation, increased anxiety, and reduced persistence on challenging tasks. The countermove is radical self-reference. The only meaningful comparison is you versus your previous self. Are you better than you were 6 months ago? Are you more capable, more consistent, more aligned with who you want to become? That's the data that actually matters for your development. Use other people's success as evidence that the destination exists, not as evidence that you're behind. Pattern 4, instant gratification. Trap discipline requires operating with a long time horizon in a world that is aggressively optimized to collapse your time horizon to minutes. Every notification, every infinite scroll feed, every one-click purchase, every instant response text message is training your brain to expect and demand immediate reward. And when your disciplined behaviors produce results on a timeline of weeks, months, or years, that trained impatience becomes a powerful force against your consistency. The countermove is process immersion. Fall in love with the daily actions themselves, not just the eventual outcomes. Find something genuinely interesting about the process. Build tracking systems that make micro-progress visible, because small, visible gains can satisfy your brain's reward requirements while the larger outcomes are still developing. and deliberately practice delayed gratification in small, low-stakes ways every day. Waiting 10 minutes before checking your phone, finishing a task before eating a meal, completing the hard work before the enjoyable work. Each small instance of delayed gratification is a neurological workout for the circuits you need for long-term discipline. Pattern 5. The victim default. The most insidious mental pattern of all, the unconscious habit of locating the cause of your results entirely outside yourself. Your circumstances are genuinely difficult. Your disadvantages are real. The unfairness you've experienced is not imaginary. None of that is in question. What's in question is whether you're going to let those real circumstances become a permanent ceiling on your agency, or whether you're going to identify every variable within your control and build your life from there. Radical responsibility is not pretending circumstances don't matter. It's refusing to let circumstances be your stopping point. The counter move is a simple, powerful daily question. In this situation, what is within my control? Narrow your focus to that. Build there, and watch what happens when you stop waiting for the circumstances to improve and start building the discipline to operate effectively within them. Mental mastery is ultimately about one capability: acting according to your commitments, regardless of what your mind is doing at that moment. Not suppressing your thoughts. Not achieving some permanently positive mental state. Not eliminating doubt or fear or resistance. Simply developing the ability to move your feet in the right direction while all of that is happening. That's mental independence, and it's the foundation of everything. The priority domination protocol, doing less to achieve more time management, is one of the most popular and most misguided concepts in personal productivity. You cannot manage time. Time is fixed. Every human being on this planet, every president, every CEO, every Olympic champion, every struggling entrepreneur receives exactly 1,440 minutes per day. Not 1 second more. What you can manage is priority. Which activities receive those minutes and in what order of importance. The most disciplined performers in the world are not the busiest. They are the most selective. They appear to have more time not because they work faster or sleep less, but because they've made ruthless decisions about what actually deserves their attention. And they protect those decisions ferociously. The priority domination protocol is about becoming ruthlessly clear on what matters most, and then engineering your life to protect it from everything that doesn't. It runs on 3 levels. Level 1. Strategic clarity. Most people confuse activity with progress. They stay busy. They check boxes. They respond promptly and attend diligently. And at the end of a week of sustained effort, they've moved almost no meaningful distance toward what actually matters to them. This is not a motivation problem. It's a prioritization problem. For every significant goal in your life, there are 2 or 3 specific activities that, if performed consistently and well, would make nearly everything else either easier or unnecessary. These are your highest leverage activities, and they deserve the vast majority of your time, energy, and best cognitive resources. Everything else is support, maintenance, or distraction. Identifying your highest leverage activities requires honesty that can be uncomfortable, because these activities are almost always the ones that feel hardest, produce no immediate reward, and can be most easily deferred in favor of things that feel productive but aren't particularly important. For a writer, it's sitting down and producing new work, not organizing past work, not researching, not planning. For a salesperson, it's having high-quality conversations with qualified prospects, not updating the CRM, not refining the pitch deck, not attending internal meetings. For someone building their fitness, it's showing up for the workouts and executing on the nutrition, not reading about fitness, not buying equipment, not perfecting the plan. Identify the 2 or 3 activities that actually drive your most important results. Protect them as if they are the most valuable resources you possess, because they are. Level 2. Tactical filtering. Every day brings an unending stream of requests, opportunities, ideas, and interruptions competing for your attention. Without a systematic filter, you'll respond reactively to whatever is loudest or most recent, which is almost never what's most important. Build a priority filter and apply it to every incoming demand on your time. 4 questions. Does this directly serve one of my highest leverage activities? Will this create meaningful progress toward my most important goals? Is this the highest value use of my time right now? And critically, does this have to be me? Or could someone or something else handle it? If the answer to those questions is primarily no, the answer to the request is no, regardless of how reasonable the request seems, how guilty you feel refusing, or how good the opportunity looks in isolation. This is the hardest part of priority management, and the most important. Every yes to something non-essential is a no to something essential. The math doesn't negotiate. Level 3. Protective systems. Knowing your priorities is not enough. You must actively defend them. The first protective system is time blocking. Scheduling specific, inviolable blocks of time for your highest leverage activities, and treating those blocks with the same non-negotiable commitment you'd give a flight or a surgery appointment. During priority blocks, you are effectively unavailable, not checking messages, not accepting interruptions, not doing quick things that take 20 minutes and break the flow that took 30 to build. The second protective system is communication management. Creating explicit boundaries around your availability that set honest expectations with the people in your life and work without requiring you to spend all day managing the exceptions. The third is energy alignment, scheduling your most demanding priority work during your natural cognitive peaks and protecting those periods from the low-stakes activities that tend to colonize them. Don't schedule your creative work at the end of a day full of meetings. Don't try to build something important during the part of your day when you're naturally in maintenance mode. The result of these 3 systems working together is not just better productivity. It's a profound shift in the quality of your daily experience, from the scattered, vaguely anxious feeling of someone who is always busy and never quite where they want to be, to the clear, grounded confidence of someone who knows exactly what matters and spends their days building it. Stress is fuel, the counterintuitive science of performance. Under pressure, everything you've been told about stress and discipline is backward. The message you've absorbed from wellness culture, from self-help content, from well-meaning coaches, is that stress is the enemy of performance, that discipline requires calm, that the ideal state for consistent behavior is low pressure, low anxiety, low stakes. This is not what the science says, not even close. Psychologists Yerkes and Dotson mapped the relationship between stress and performance nearly a century ago, and the Yerkes-Dotson curve has been replicated in dozens of domains since. The relationship is not linear. More stress doesn't uniformly mean worse performance. It's an inverted U. Performance increases as stress increases, up to an optimal peak. Then, as stress exceeds your capacity to process it, performance begins to decline. The implication is radical. You need the right amount of stress to perform at your best. Not zero. Not overwhelming. Optimal. Most people in the discipline space are operating at suboptimal stress levels in one of 2 directions. Either they're under-stressed, comfortable, coasting, not genuinely challenged, and they mistake that comfort for stability when it's actually stagnation. or they're chronically overstressed, reactive, scattered, using all available cognitive resources just to manage the overwhelm. And they mistake that busyness for productivity. Neither serves discipline. Both require adjustment. Stress awareness is the starting point. You need to develop calibrated awareness of your actual stress level, not a vague sense of fine or not fine, but a clear sense of where you are on the curve. Under stress signals, lack of urgency, difficulty focusing, tendency to drift and procrastinate, absence of meaningful challenge, sense that days are passing without purpose. Overstress signals, anxiety that bleeds between domains, difficulty making decisions, emotional volatility, cognitive fog, physical tension that doesn't resolve with rest. Optimal stress signals, clear sense of purpose, natural urgency without panic, capacity for focused attention, genuine engagement with challenges, feeling stretched but not overwhelmed. Learn to recognize these signals in yourself. They're your real-time performance data. Stress modulation means actively adjusting your stress level based on what your performance demands and your current capacity. When you're understressed, add productive pressure. Set aggressive deadlines. Create public accountability. Increase the stakes. Take on challenges that stretch your current capability. Constructive stress is one of the most powerful motivational forces available. When it's calibrated to a level you can metabolize. When you're overstressed, reduce friction. Improve your systems so execution requires less cognitive load. Eliminate activities that consume resources without producing commensurate value. Implement genuine recovery practices. And be honest about what's optional. The critical principle? Do this proactively. By the time you're overwhelmed, you've already passed the optimal window for easy correction. Use leading indicators: sleep quality, decision quality, emotional reactivity, to adjust your stress levels before they impact your discipline. Stress utilization is the most advanced skill, redirecting stress energy toward your highest priorities rather than letting it scatter your focus. The arousal that anxiety creates is real energy. The urgency that deadline pressure creates is real fuel. These are not states to eliminate, they are states to channel. When you feel stressed about a deadline, that's energy available for deep work. When you feel frustrated by a challenge, that's energy available for creative problem solving. When you feel anxious about your performance, that's energy available for preparation and execution. The reframe is simple. From "I'm too stressed to work" to "I'm going to channel this energy into the work." From "this pressure is paralyzing me" to "this pressure is the urgency I needed." The most advanced practitioners use deliberate stress exposure to build capacity. Cold showers, fasting periods, difficult conversations, challenging physical training, voluntary discomfort of various kinds, all calibrated and intentional. You're training your nervous system to remain functional under pressure by repeatedly experiencing pressure in controlled doses and practicing disciplined response. The goal is not to become numb to stress. It's to become proficient at it. The adaptation matrix. Why your discipline system must evolve or die. The biggest failure mode for long-term discipline isn't giving up in the early stages. It's building something that works and then refusing to evolve it. Discipline systems that don't adapt eventually break, not from external disruption, but from internal staleness. The habit that was a genuine challenge 6 months ago becomes effortless maintenance. The routine that served one life phase becomes constraining in the next. The system built for the person you were becomes inadequate for the person you're becoming. Real discipline isn't about maintaining fixed habits. It's about continuously evolving your habits in alignment with your continuously evolving goals, circumstances, and capabilities. I call this disciplined flexibility. being absolutely non-negotiable about your core commitments and values, while remaining genuinely open to revising the methods and tactics through which you honor those commitments. The adaptation matrix runs on 4 processes. Performance tracking. Measuring not just whether you're doing your habits, but whether your habits are actually producing the results you need. This requires both leading indicators, daily behaviors and inputs that predict future outcomes, and lagging indicators, actual results and outcomes. Tracking only one without the other leaves you either flying blind on outcomes or confusing motion with progress. For fitness, leading indicators might include workout adherence, nutrition quality, sleep consistency. Lagging indicators include strength metrics, body composition, energy levels over time. Both matter. If your leading indicators are strong but your lagging indicators aren't improving, your system needs revision, not harder effort. System auditing, regularly and honestly evaluating what's working, what's stagnating, and what's missing. Every 90 days, sit down with your discipline systems and ask hard questions. Which habits are still challenging me appropriately? Which have become so automatic that they're no longer building anything, just maintaining? Which domains of my life have strong discipline systems, and which have significant gaps? Which of my current habits are aligned with my current goals, and which are leftovers from previous goals that no longer serve my direction? Systems that worked at a previous level of development often become inadequate or even limiting at the next level. The discipline infrastructure that gets you to intermediate fitness won't get you to advanced performance. The productivity systems that work for a solo creator break down when you're leading a team. Audit, evolve, upgrade, strategic pivoting, making deliberate changes to methods based on audit results and performance data. The key principle: pivot tactics, not values. Your commitment to health, excellence, and consistent growth doesn't change. How you express that commitment can and should evolve regularly. Maybe daily meditation isn't producing results for you, but weekly deep reflection sessions are transformative. Maybe structured training blocks work better than daily habits for your specific fitness goals. Maybe your writing process needs a weekly sprint model rather than a daily minimum. The data tells you your job is to listen to it and adjust, not to defend a system because you built it, or because it worked for someone else, or because changing it feels like admitting failure. Capacity expansion, systematically increasing the sophistication and challenge of your discipline systems as your capability grows. This is not about adding more habits indefinitely. It's about progressing in depth and quality, building more sophisticated versions of existing habits, adding new domains of discipline as previous domains stabilize, and continuously seeking the edge of your current capability. Someone who has mastered basic sleep consistency can develop more nuanced sleep architecture optimization. Someone who has mastered daily movement can develop structured athletic periodization. Someone who has mastered basic time blocking can develop sophisticated energy management and priority sequencing. The discipline life is not a destination. It is a practice, one that deepens, expands, and becomes richer over time. The goal is not to have a discipline system. The goal is to become someone whose entire approach to life is disciplined, adaptively, sustainably, and continuously. The Integration Masterclass: Building Your Personal Discipline. Operating System. Everything you've learned in the previous 14 chapters means exactly nothing without this final piece. Integration. Because the gravest failure mode in personal development isn't lack of knowledge. It's the gap between knowing and living, between understanding a principle intellectually and embodying it as a default operating mode, between reading a book and building a life. Most people consume self-improvement content the way they watch cooking shows. They enjoy the material. They feel inspired. They fully intend to apply it. And then they go back to eating the same things they've always eaten, without any meaningful change to their actual kitchen. This chapter is the kitchen. The discipline integration process runs through 5 sequential phases, each building on the previous, together forming what I call your personal discipline operating system. A comprehensive, individualized architecture for consistent human performance. Phase 1. Foundation establishment. Before anything else, 3 non-negotiable foundations must be in place. Identity clarity. Decide, not figure out someday, but decide right now who you are becoming. Write it down. Speak it. Commit to it. Not as an aspiration, but as a present tense declaration of the self you are actively constructing. I am someone who follows through. I am someone who operates with consistency and purpose. I am someone who builds and maintains the habits that express my deepest values. Environmental alignment. Do the audit. Identify the 3 most significant environmental obstacles to your discipline goals, physical, digital, or social, and eliminate or restructure them this week, not eventually, this week. Environment always wins in the long run, and every day you delay alignment is a day the environment wins against you. Minimum viable consistency. Define your non-negotiable floor for each major discipline domain, the smallest action that preserves the pattern. Write them down. Commit to them unconditionally. These are your baseline, below which you never go, whatever the day brings. Phase 2. System synchronization. Connect your discipline systems so they reinforce rather than compete with each other. Your morning routine should prepare you for your most important work. Your most important work should support your health goals. Your health habits should maintain the energy required for deep work. Your social systems should reinforce the identity you're constructing. Your environment should make the sequence feel inevitable. Map the connections. Identify the dependencies. If your deep work depends on good sleep, and your good sleep depends on your evening wind-down routine, those systems are linked, and a failure in one creates downstream failures in the others. Know the architecture. Protect the critical nodes. Align the timing of your discipline practices with your natural energy rhythms. Don't fight your biology. Map your energy throughout a typical day and schedule each discipline practice during the energy window most appropriate for it. High-stakes creative work at peak energy. Routine maintenance at moderate energy. Recovery and preparation at low energy. Phase 3. Momentum acceleration. As your foundation solidifies and your systems synchronize, begin the deliberate process of expansion, adding new challenges, increasing existing standards, and building adjacent disciplines. The critical discipline here is sequencing, one new habit at a time. Fully anchor it before adding the next. The temptation to accelerate this phase is powerful, especially when early success generates enthusiasm. Resist it. The architecture can only expand as fast as the foundation can support. Leverage cross-domain momentum deliberately. As physical discipline strengthens, notice how it affects your mental clarity, emotional regulation, and professional execution. Use those observed connections to motivate continued investment in all domains. The integrated picture is always more compelling than any single piece. Phase 4. Mastery refinement. At some point, if you've committed to the work, your discipline systems will transition from requiring conscious effort to operating largely automatically. The morning routine runs. The habits execute. The identity is stable. The environment is aligned. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the most interesting phase. Mastery refinement is about developing the ability to maintain and evolve these systems with minimum overhead, freeing cognitive resources for higher-level challenges, more sophisticated goals, and deeper development. It's also about developing your capacity to share what you've learned. Teaching discipline to others is one of the most powerful ways to deepen your own practice. When you can articulate the principles clearly enough to guide someone else through the process, you've achieved a level of understanding that merely executing the system yourself doesn't require. Phase 5. Legacy creation. The final phase of discipline mastery extends beyond personal achievement. When you maintain extraordinary consistency over years and decades, when your standards become visible to the people around you, when your execution becomes a cultural fact in your family, your workplace, your community, you begin to exercise a form of influence that no amount of talking or teaching could generate. Your consistency becomes permission. Permission for the person watching you who thinks, privately, that this level of discipline is beyond them. Your sustained example answers that doubt. It says, this is possible, not just for exceptional people. For someone like me, the habits you maintain, the standards you uphold, the way you handle failure and return to your commitments, all of it ripples outward in ways you'll never fully measure. This is the highest expression of discipline, not the achievement it produces, but the person it makes you, and the invitation that person extends to everyone who witnesses what sustained commitment actually looks like. Here is the truth you need to carry forward from everything in this book. Discipline is not a battle. It's an architecture. It's not about gritting your teeth harder. It's about designing systems smart enough that your teeth don't have to be gritted. It's not about having more willpower than other people. It's about needing less willpower because you've engineered your environment, your habits, your identity, and your energy to make the right choices, the natural ones. It's not about becoming someone fundamentally different from who you are. It's about becoming who you actually are, more fully, more consistently, and with greater clarity about what that means. The frameworks in this book are not ideas to think about. They are structures to build. The question was never whether they work. They work. The neuroscience is settled. The behavioral science is established. The evidence from millions of hours of human performance research is unambiguous. The question is only whether you will actually build. Not tomorrow. Not when your circumstances improve. Not when you feel ready, because that feeling will not arrive. It is not coming to announce that now is the time. Now is the time. The next choice you make, the next action you take, the next opportunity to demonstrate in some small but real way that you are the person you've decided to become. That's where it starts. That's where it always starts. Build. Extended. The social energy equation. There's one more dimension of energy management that deserves its own deep treatment because it's the one most consistently overlooked by high performers and the one most consistently responsible for unexpected burnout and discipline collapse. Relational energy. You are in energy exchange with every person you interact with, every day. Some exchanges generate net positive energy. You walk away from the conversation more engaged, more motivated, clearer about your direction. Others generate net negative energy. You walk away depleted, doubtful, vaguely heavy in ways that are difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore. Most people are completely unconscious of this exchange. They attribute their end-of-day exhaustion to the workload without ever examining the quality of the interactions that filled that day. They blame their wavering discipline on stress, without recognizing that the specific stressor is a relationship dynamic that drains 3 hours of productive energy every time it activates. Becoming conscious of this exchange is not about becoming calculating or cold in your relationships. It's about understanding that your relational energy balance has direct, measurable downstream effects on your capacity for disciplined behavior, and making intentional choices as a result. Start tracking, even informally, how you feel after significant interactions, after certain meetings, certain phone calls, certain social gatherings. Do you feel energized or depleted, clearer or more confused, more committed to your goals or more uncertain about them? This data is actionable. You can increase the frequency of energizing interactions. You can restructure or reduce the frequency of depleting ones. You can change the format of unavoidable draining interactions, written rather than verbal, shorter rather than longer, with a defined purpose rather than open-ended. You can also deliberately invest in the quality of your most important relationships, because the people who know you best, who believe in you most deeply, and who consistently reflect your highest self back to you are one of your most powerful discipline assets. The research on social support and behavior change is consistent and striking. People with strong social support systems are dramatically more likely to maintain healthy habits, recover faster from setbacks, and sustain long-term behavioral change than people who attempt the same changes in isolation. This isn't surprising when you understand the neuroscience. When you feel genuinely connected to people who support your growth, your brain produces oxytocin, a neurochemical that reduces cortisol, enhances trust, increases risk tolerance, and creates a sense of safety that makes challenging behavioral changes feel less threatening. In other words, real connection doesn't just feel good. It makes discipline neurologically easier. Invest in the relationships that see you clearly, support you genuinely, and hold you to your best self. Not because it's a nice thing to do, though it is, but because those relationships are infrastructure. They are as essential to your long-term discipline architecture as your morning routine or your environmental design. And one more thing, invest in your relationship with yourself. The discipline you're building is ultimately an expression of how seriously you take your own potential, of how much you believe your growth matters, of the degree to which you are willing to treat your own future self as someone worth building a life for. Self-respect is not arrogance. It's the foundation of sustainable self-improvement. When you genuinely respect yourself, your time, your capacity, your potential, it becomes much harder to squander those things on habits and patterns that don't serve your growth. You are worth the effort this requires. That's not a motivational statement. That's a structural prerequisite. The 7 daily disciplines of elite performers. Throughout the research and practice behind this audiobook, certain behavioral patterns emerged with striking consistency among the highest performing, most consistently disciplined people across domains, from professional athletes and military operators to Nobel laureates and transformational business leaders. These aren't secrets. They're not genetic gifts. They're choices made daily, often quietly with no external audience. Here are the 7. 1. They begin before they feel ready. Elite performers don't wait for motivation, inspiration, or ideal circumstances to initiate action. They have learned, through direct, repeated experience, that the feeling of readiness almost never precedes action. It follows it. Motion creates momentum. Momentum creates motivation. The starting gun fires whether the feeling is there or not. Every morning, they do the first thing on their list before they've had time to negotiate with themselves, before the excuses have fully assembled, before the reasons to wait have mobilized. They act first and feel ready second. 2. They protect their best hours. Without exception, the most productive and disciplined people identify their natural cognitive peak, the 2 to 4 hour window in which their mind operates with the greatest clarity, creativity, and capacity. and they guard that window with extraordinary intensity. No meetings during peak hours. No email. No social media. No administrative tasks. Their best hours belong exclusively to their most important work. Everything else waits. If you currently allow your peak hours to be colonized by reactive tasks and other people's agendas, this single change, protecting your best 2 hours for your most important priorities, will produce more meaningful progress than almost any other discipline intervention available to you. 3. They close every day with intention. The end of the workday is not just the beginning of leisure. For elite performers, it's a deliberate transition ritual, a brief but structured process of reviewing what was accomplished, acknowledging progress, identifying what needs to carry forward, and mentally releasing the day so that evening becomes genuine recovery rather than low-grade continuation. This practice serves multiple functions simultaneously. It creates a sense of completion that allows for real psychological rest. It identifies wins that would otherwise pass unnoticed, feeding the identity-based habit reinforcement loop. It prepares tomorrow's first action, eliminating the decision fatigue of figuring out where to start when tomorrow begins. And it provides a daily data set for the pattern analysis that drives continuous improvement. 4. They treat recovery as performance. The highest performers understand that recovery is not the opposite of discipline. Recovery is a component of discipline. Deliberate, strategic recovery, adequate sleep, active decompression, genuine leisure, physical restoration, is what allows sustained high performance over years and decades rather than brilliant sprints followed by forced retreats. They don't brag about how little they sleep. They don't wear exhaustion as a badge of commitment. They understand that the athlete who overtrained is not stronger than the athlete who periodized correctly. The overtraining is not discipline. It's short-sighted consumption of a finite resource. They rest with the same intentionality they bring to their work, and as a result, their work remains at a caliber that undisciplined rest would quickly erode. 5. They audit without judgment. At regular intervals, daily, weekly, quarterly, they examine their performance data honestly and without emotional charge, not to celebrate or to condemn, to understand what worked, what didn't, what pattern is emerging, what does the data suggest about what needs to change. They've learned to dissociate their identity from their performance metrics. A bad week of disciplined data is not a verdict on their character. It's information about their systems, and information, unlike judgment, is actionable. 6. They elevate the people around them. The most sustainable discipline in the long run is not solitary. It's relational. Elite performers consistently invest in the growth of the people around them, not from altruism alone, but from the understanding that the culture they create in their immediate environment directly shapes the standards they're held to. When you help others build discipline, you deepen your own. When you create accountability for others, you strengthen your own accountability structures. When you model consistency for the people watching you, you reinforce the identity of consistency in yourself. This is the virtuous cycle that self-reinforcing excellence creates over time. 7. They return. This is the simplest and most important of all. Every single highly disciplined person, without a single exception, has had periods of failure, collapse, distraction, and departure from their commitments. Every one of them has experienced the particular humiliation of knowing better and doing worse, of building something carefully and watching it unravel, of starting over when they'd hoped never to have to start over again. The thing that distinguishes them is not that they didn't fall. It's that they returned, without drama, without excessive self-recrimination, without waiting until the conditions were perfect or the shame had fully dissipated. They simply returned to the practice. Put one foot back on the path. Did the minimum viable action. And let the momentum rebuild from there. Returning is a skill. It gets easier with practice. And every return, no matter how small, is a demonstration to your nervous system that failure is not a permanent state. It's a temporary position on the way back to who you are. Return. Always return.